Should I start this as pretentiously as possible? Yeah, I should. From the very first moments that an idea of something is formed, it is limited because limitation is the only way it can exist. If it did not have qualities which other things lacked, then it would not be something of its own. The very first moment you say a sentence, it is defined by being only a select few words, which are defined by being a select few letters, which are defined by being a select few limitations we place on sounds for communication's sake. From words to stories made from them to the thoughts we think about them, everything which exists is subject to limitation. We are not excluded. From the moment we are conceived, genetics, as well as other things like location, begin to, at the very least, code our experiences, if not outright determine some. If you have tall parents, you'll likely be tall. If you're born in this place, you'll have those opportunities. These factors themselves will then alter your experiences in a certain way, limiting you from some opportunities while it provides others. For everything that we can decide, or which should be directed by us but is dictated by society instead, there are many other things which are truly set in stone. And nowhere is this more clear than stone itself. Rocks are quite literally defined by their form. Certain pressures of certain materials form certain structures which exhibit certain qualities and allow them to be used for certain purposes. You wouldn't build a road out of sandstone because it crumbles. You'd need something more solid which maintains its shape for a long time. But you also wouldn't bother laying down granite for a path. There would be much more effort and energy used than necessary for the task. Each one has specific uses and capabilities, compared and contrasted against the others on literal scales to define their existences. Some are valuable and sought after, while many more are simply refuse from collecting the others. Of course, as inanimate objects, it's not like they're aware of this fact. There's no social dynamic of a rock's worth. But what if there was? Land of the Lustrous is a series set long after disaster in post-human times, where the microorganisms left after mass extinction grow into the earth, allowing gemstones which rise from it to think and feel and act. They run about on what remains of the planet, fighting off foes who come down from the skies and seek to use them as jewelry, the Lunarians, as they crumble apart but are put back together just the same each time. They can't die, and if so one happens to shatter, they simply collect the pieces and repair them, persisting for eternity. That is, unless their consciousness is seen to be interrupted by being broken so much apart and taken away. But their lives and roles are as such defined by their birthright. Diamonds will be hard so they can fight, but Cinnabar will be soft so it can't. Black diamond will be durable so it can take any force, but Phosphophyllite will crumble from a glance. Their comparisons are literally made upon the Mohs scale, with higher numbers used as praise and low numbers as insults, and their tasks are defined by these capabilities for eternity. Even if they break themselves down, they can only be rebuilt the same. Change isn't something which really exists here, meaning their birth is all defining, with their tasks given by their sensei determining how their life will be lived. Are they a fighter, a researcher, a doctor? Well, these can change and skills can be developed. Most often it is a long-lasting determination. And in that, they trust him entirely, despite their own anxieties and the clear darkness under the surface he presents. Why does he meditate for so long? Why is he so powerful? And later, why does even their enemy love him? They know he isn't telling the entire truth, and yet they've all decided to trust him without question. While there is certainly some kind of horror in the lives they live, and these structures have their own ills, they choose this because there is one much worse than coming to terms with birthright, given purpose, and a little doubt. And that is eternal questioning. Not all of the gems are happy with their lives, even some of the most valued. Diamond, who's looked up at by many, looks down upon himself, because there are others who can do everything they can, but better. That is, their purpose is not something wholly unique which proves a value to their specific existence. There's Bort, a black diamond who's their partner, from the same class but much more durable. The former will break from strong impacts despite their hardness cleaved into distinct sections, while the latter, well, hardly ever will. As such, Bort forbids them from fighting whenever possible because they simply perform the duty better and safer. Now, Diamond tries to develop new techniques to counteract this, like catching the arrows and slinging them back at their foes, but this simply results in them breaking anyway, sort of only proving Bort's point. Their efforts can't overcome their form because their form is who they are and always will be, such as a gem. This leads to a lot of self-hatred. When Phosphophyllite comes to them asking how they can find something valuable to do, Diamond suggests they change. They can say this while almost no one else offers such advice because it's what's on their mind. They themselves are desiring and considering change, but it can't occur because that's the nature of their life. And so this is the eternal horror they take comfort against. What Diamond does instead is finds a way to cope with their form. Much later in the series, the strongest foe they faced across thousands of years arrives, which even Bort is useless against, as they simply seek to draw it back so their seemingly all-powerful sensei can handle it instead when he wakes. Trapped in the school building alone with it, since Diamond was recently taken off Bort's team, they're forced to face it down alone, where for so long they've simply been made to watch someone else do so. They felt awful from being left behind like this, as if it proved every fear they had, and yet they accepted it because they knew a new pairing was the best option for everyone. They were not valuable in any special way, while Bort's new partner became so. However, knowing that help won't simply appear as they try for some time to run, but remember they've been left behind, they eventually take the only option they can see, deciding to stand and fight. It's not ideal, and in fact, it's outright terrifying and regretted almost immediately. However, this is the chance they've really been waiting for, to break out of another shadow and see if they still provide any value. If they can manage to do something here before anyone else, that proves a strength that's their own, right? A reason for them to be. And it turns out this is exactly it. While Bort didn't manage to land a single meaningful attack, Diamond does exactly this because they break more easily. Since their non-durable body shatters, they're left with a hard, sharp point where their limbs break off during the fight. This becomes their method of attack when the foe is stuck, and they slice it into two parts, the first anyone did actual damage to it. Instead of changing themselves, Diamond finds something that only their specific form could have done, at least to that degree. A weakness Bort doesn't have, becoming a strength that Bort lacks, despite all the damage it required. What this provides is all it needs to, a sliver of evidence. How often will this actually happen? How powerful really is it to be broken to be able to attack like no one else? It was desperation itself, a moment which only occurred because it was forced to. However, it was a desperation which they, out of everyone, could handle best, a unique moment for their form that it was perfect for. And this is all it's needed to come to terms with oneself, because however small, it is a situation which required them. It is a reason, however unlikely to occur, that they should exist for. With this, they're able to come to terms with themselves, deciding that their love for Bort and everything which they could have in this life is fine. For the rest of eternity, their mind can rest easy on this fact. This evidence is comfort against eternity. As is said directly in the show,
過酷で役立つ仕事は自分の存在に疑問を抱かないためのよく聞く麻酔です。
Diamond is a specific example who finds exactly this, that they can go on doing this forever, exactly because they know there's something they're best suited for, even if it's only a small subset of this eternal task. Deep down, it's known to be pointless. It's known it doesn't matter or will never happen. Yet it's accepted because the alternative is much worse. To question oneself forever demands a counterpoint. But that counterpoint can come from almost nothing, because questioning oneself is the very act of taking nothing as a possibility for who one is. And so that means that anything, any small amount of proof, is greater than being nothing. As such, the small possibility works to fulfill this. Most of the others follow the same path as this, with their specific anxieties at times, but most often working diligently at their tasks with happy faces. No one really wants to question for eternity, but some aren't so lucky. Diamond is able to come to terms with himself because some of who they are is valuable to their people. There are others who create clothes or study or repair, however most of them are fighters, protecting from the Lunarians arriving from above. Diamond's form, even if not the best, is still suited for this task, so they have the means to find that kind of evidence in the same way a designer can be satisfied with taking 1/100th off the collar length. Even if it's meaningless or almost meaningless, it's theirs, and it has some, however small, addition of value. It's a fine-tuning of oneself to last for eternity. But the basis of potential value from birthright is still required for this. And since that value is determined from comparison, there are others who won't have the same grace. This is Phos, who doesn't have hardness or durability. Fragile and unremarkable, it's even worse as their color is desired by the Lunarians, which means their presence is a danger. They attract but cannot fight off their foes. As such, they have no purpose gifted from their sensei, and when he does provide them one, it's a complete mismatch. He tasks them, the most undisciplined, with creating an encyclopedia of their world, a goal they feel no desire for. And really, why would they? In the end, it's mostly busy work designed to try and fulfill the requirement of rigorous duty, protecting against eternal questioning. But this isn't something only they can do to prove value, and so it doesn't provide any. Anyone could just write down the things they see around them. It's an insult, if anything, to have to write while all the others act. Their form offers no baseline for such a thing in this society as most of the others do. However, they then turn it into such a thing as the goal shifts from that to trying to make a new single discovery. If they can find some knowledge that no one else has, then that is something uniquely theirs, even if it isn't from their form, right? Even if it's just one novel thing amongst this huge world, all it needs to be is a sliver, something to put their name to. This is the same kind of quest Diamond was on, just without their form as the basis to prove it. And, well, that leads to many other complications. First, though, we'll look at an in-between of Diamond and Phos, which is Cinnabar. They come into the story as Phos zeroes in on a new discovery, finding a better job than night patrol for Cinnabar to perform. They leak a toxic substance at all times which can ruin the gem's ability to take in the light they need to live, and so they live apart from the rest, coming out only at night when the Lunarians never arrive. The task they complete without fail for years and years is a pointless one, rising each night with the same sad line. Not once has it mattered if they were out or not. And this is what they chose. Due to their unique abilities, Sensei couldn't find a purpose for Cinnabar, rather trying to convince them that living itself was enough. However, they didn't accept this and suggested Night Watch as their role themselves, and he has simply never found a better task for them to complete. Much like Phos, they had the opportunity to laze around all day aimless and instead chose to tackle something, anything, even if it itself was just as pointless as doing nothing. The difference is just that one takes effort which can be reasoned to not be pointless. One requires limitation of oneself that speaks to uniqueness and as such, value. Like anyone else, Cinnabar wants to feel the effects of that rigorous work because, as Sensei also says,
私たちはあまりに複雑だが
their minds, the logic and reason within them, are, as any, feeble enough to work forever on a sliver of proof. However, that still demands that one is required, as they can't escape those basic functions. So even with no reason to, the task will still be completed because it is a search, and a search is nothing more than future value. After all, Cinnabar's form still provides a chance to be unique and as such valued. Right now, it is a negative, horrible thing which isolates her. But what if it turns out to be the way they defeat the Lunarians for good or something like that? Ever since it was shown, I spent the entire show wondering when it would play into a larger purpose, not Chekhov's gun, but Cinnabar's power. And they probably feel the same to some degree. Even if it isn't good now, it is some amount of hope because it is distinctly theirs. No one would be able to do what it is they might happen to do in the future. It just needs a way to be valued. And so they persist, waking each night for no reason, but in the hopes of one. However, in that persistence, their more stated desires show a darker side to all of this, that negative uniqueness can be just as valued as a positive one. The need for meaning is strong enough to force us into terrible places. Cinnabar is entirely worthless to the Lunarians, who would never seek to take them to the moon like the others, even if they just stood out in the open forever. It's a literal statement that they aren't valued, even if it's by the enemy. Nevertheless, they actually express a desire that they would take her because then,
好きでなら俺に価値をつけてくれるかもしれない。
even if it's just to be used as a mindless adornment, a piece of jewelry on someone else's form, it is at least something desired from them specifically. Just the way the light hits your corners can be enough when your surroundings have never offered anything better. Being an object is just as much proof as anything else, even if it has no true benefits. But it doesn't need benefits. It's just to satisfy our feeble logic. It wards off the greatest fear of eternal questioning. In fact, then, this outcome might even be the best, because it is the only one which truly assures that questioning ends, the ceasement of all anxieties and fears replaced with a kind of eternal peace, a fact we all know only one true way to reach, and yet we all search it out in every other way for good reason. This is what Sensei is, a different form of peace, with his looming presence and supreme power, yet the strange, gentle nature he can exhibit just the same. When they break, he seems to feel a sadness deeper than any, no matter they're used to him. When they succeed, he gives them that gentle reassurance. Even when their harshest foe yet goes to strike him, he instead greets it with a comforting feeling, which even those attacked by it go on to accept. At the end of the day, it's all anyone wants, that peace. And they have their slivers, so they doubt this kindness their enemy presents means nothing to them. To let it mean something is to open that endless door, and they have already chosen comfort. Cinnabar and Phos simply can't do this because he gave them no reason to be able to, no part of their form which he decreed some kind of value to. No sliver from him, even if the hope for one themselves keeps at least Cinnabar going. What they struggle for is a truth of their own, not a truth he provided to them. And I think we can dig further into what Sensei is doing, even though the mysteries of the show lie in waiting for season 2 or go read the manga hell. His power is made an immediate note from the very beginning, with a simple shout being able to break Phos into what looks like hundreds of pieces, and of course the ability to dispatch their foes in a much simpler way than any of the gems. This is something that none of them question because they don't desire the pain of questioning, but at least to me, it was an immediate wonder. Why do they fight if he can do so in a much greater way? I would guess the answer is what he said before, that we are too complex to be satisfied with simply living. Because this is exactly the situation Phos is in, without purpose while someone else fights. They laze around all day, the first to go to sleep and the last to wake up, with no duties or responsibilities placed on them seemingly at all. They are eternally free, and in that freedom they find no happiness. They can never be happy because they have too many directions for happiness to stretch out in. It turns out we crave some degree of that limitation which haunts us, some sort of direction to take which proves we have a reason to be, something which others are not for us to be. This is what Sensei not fighting does for the gems. It gives them that rigorous work which puts meaning to existence, however deep down it might be known to be false. None of them need to fight, but doing so, even at such a great potential cost, keeps away the worst result of eternal questioning. And now, in the most ProfessorViral fashion of all time, only halfway through this video do we finally get to the main character. Of course, we'll be talking about Phos's part of the story. We can draw its distinction from the others in one spoken line, where they question why Cinnabar would dutifully perform work they know to be pointless.
期待も心配もされず褒められもしない仕事なんて意味わかんない。
They don't understand because Phos has no hope like Cinnabar, not even a harmful uniqueness which would one day prove worthwhile. Their only value is to the enemy who seeks to literally objectify them. They are truly without purpose, unlike the rest, understanding the busy work they're given since they change it at will, where no one else would even think of questioning Sensei's choice. They all wonder how Phos can be the only one to do so, and it's because Phos was one of the few who has failed. His system works great for many, but not for all. They're valued so minimally that when consumed by a large snail-like creature, no one but Diamond actually tries to find a way to turn Phos back. They just say this change wouldn't actually change anything. It's just a new appearance to the same uselessness. Although they're not actually in the snail, they're in the shell, and the snail's just communicating it, but they all think that way, and so it's essentially what we could analyze that as. And then Diamond is the only one trying to actually fix them because they themselves were looking at change and wondering. If not for that, the story may have ended here. They don't understand pointless work because they have no uniqueness and also no hope for it. Phos has so little value that, much like Cinnabar, they'll accept being used because at least it's something. It turns out that snail-like creature, King, is another form of sentient life, which only they can understand from having been consumed by it. Once in the ocean, they return to an original form and explain the legends of history to Phos, including of King's own people who've been captured by the Lunarians already. Their shells hold precious materials just like the gems are. As such, they use Phos as bait, offering them up in exchange for their brother. Once they're so far out, the gem can't be saved. But that brother is strong enough to defeat the Lunarians, leaving them with Phos to contemplate the situation and how the duo can go about saving the rest of their kind. Listening to this all, Phos doesn't respond with anger, but instead simply with a defeated tone, saying,
ずるい。そんなこと聞いたら王のこと怒れないじゃない。
It's because they can't be angry at someone fulfilling what they don't have, a purpose. These two have a reason to be, a goal, and a value unknown to the eternal gems in their limited time. Phos has nothing of the sort. If they can at least be bait for the purpose of another, that's more than they've ever been before, right? It's another step down, now not even finding the purpose of another, instead simply being used for the purpose of another. Their efforts only led down the rungs of possibility to unhealthier options. It's as if who they are simply can't be valuable in any way, no matter the effort. And then they change. Phos's legs are lost, however, a few bits of shell are left with them, just enough for the agate inside to be crafted into a new pair, if their body accepts it. At first it seems grim as they're unable to work the new appendages, and the others simply leave them alone on a stool in the sun to go off and continue ignoring eternity with their own tasks. Phos struggles, but to no result. But then into their mind pops Cinnabar and the responsibility they set for themselves, and they spring up without a second thought, standing strong and confident on two new legs, ones which carry them faster than any of the other gems. Suddenly, there's hope. This speed is something no one else can do, at least not to that degree. In this, there is a hint of the value they've never had. Being broken and rebuilt differently gave Phos the platform everyone else had to begin with. Or more specifically, the determination found in their goal did. If it wasn't for those thoughts of Cinnabar that spurred them off the ground and up into action, they probably would have just sat around all day. But having something of their own to chase provided the speed to get there quicker. So was it really the new legs, or did they simply jumpstart what could have always been found from within? Just a little hint that the physical change alone might not be the true change which is needed. Further, there's a downside as well. The gem's memories are stored in the microorganisms in their body, and so when the pieces are lost, their memories are as well. When Phos is trying to walk again, they can't remember who Jade is, and many of their teachings from Sensei are lost along with this. And this creates a pretty steep cost for physical change. In exchange for greater abilities, a part of the self is lost forever. The gems are defined by their structures, and this only solidifies it more by tying the body and the mind. Because without the same memories, the person running at blazing speed isn't Phos, but actually just someone who looks and sounds and thinks a lot like them, but not quite exactly like them. Important things they once held dear will register as meaningless. For now, it doesn't seem to impact too much. They're still received as essentially the same person and remember most things. But that itself is kind of an issue because they didn't like who they were. Despite all the speed, they're still not strong or experienced in any way. They've never held a sword because they're too weak to be able to. Even the lightest one drags them down instantly. Well, I guess they technically did once, but it didn't quite work out well. What's natural to the others was a complete embarrassment to them, and now still is, even if lessened. All the others start to say things like, if only you had arms to match those legs, suggesting in a way they probably didn't intend that Phos should give up more of who they were, and they go on being the same old version of themselves for a bit. They do get a chance to go on patrol finally, as Sensei allows for it, but, well, it isn't quite what was expected. From the sidelines, Phos was only tuning in when something exciting happened, as the bell tolled and everyone kicked into action. But in reality, patrol is mostly, well, nothing. They gather some flowers or seeds for medicine and keep themselves moving, but the Lunarians only show up every few days or so. Most of the time is actually, well, boring, just knocking about, doing nothing. The only real difference is now that their days start earlier and end later, all in exhaustion. This is really all of what comes from a greater opportunity. Thinking on it, they say,
ちょっと変わったぐらいじゃうまくいかないね。
Phos isn't actually any happier from what's occurred. All that's really happened is they've seen they still have a lot of work to do. For every opportunity, there is another cost. That a new form still needs some amount of a new mind. Or maybe more change to make it work. After all, doesn't remaining mostly the same person, being treated the same way, defeat the very purpose of why this was sought to begin with? Things don't go much better when Phos finally does get a chance. A new form of Lunarian appears. Amethyst, the partner they had for a while, goes to fight it off as Phos freezes in terror. They're broken apart, and an enraged Bort has to save the day. They have speed now, sure, but they were still useless in their role. They didn't have knowledge, experience, strength, mentality, partnership, and training to be able to actually tackle this work. The new legs provided a platform, but they didn't solve the issue. What they got still has to be used correctly, still has to be tempered and trained, change which occurs not in the form, but in the self and how it's used. This will come in due time. After all, they couldn't even lift a sword before, and now can if nothing else. But waiting for your value isn't exactly something desirable, even to eternal creatures. If we were willing to wait for value, then we'd never have the drive to find it to begin with, because tomorrow would always be just as good. And so, all this experience did was confirm Phos's fears, as a put back together Amethyst actually isn't even mad. They apologize for trying too hard and showing off and causing the issue, even if Phos was never able to move. The one who did 100% of the work is saying sorry. With their ability to act as two, Amethyst is pretty secure in value. There is no one unique in the same way. They can rest assured that there's one of those diamond-style, rare situations only they could solve and ease into eternity with that, even if it never arrives. So they can blame themselves and apologize. It won't harm an ego which has already chosen comfort. But it's not great for Phos because it shows how little they expect, and that also means how little they were able to grow. More still needs to be done. It's new legs, but the same person.
怒られなかったのが悔しくて眠れない。
It's the old line said by coaches time and time again that the reason they're hard on you is because they still care. And when they stop pushing you is when they've given up and expect nothing. 0% is what they expect Phos's 100% to be. While the rest of them begin hibernating for winter, since they need the sun's energy to stay awake, Phos is running too much of a mental sprint to sleep. What was the point of this all then? Did they just need to change more? With these thoughts circling around, they end up tagging along with Antarcticite, the winter caretaker of sorts. Their body is only solid at low temperatures, so they emerge in the wintertime when everyone else sleeps, a very solitary existence. They're also so busy during it, there's hardly a moment to relax, with everyone else needing taken care of, and the ice floes which need to be cut, and the snow which needs to be moved, and so on and so on. Their room is empty because they're never in it except to sleep. It sounds like a pretty lonely and awful existence to work so tirelessly for people they can't even grow deep connections with due to their form's very inescapable nature, the downfalls that come with that. But that downfall is also proof of their value because they are the only one who can exist in winter at the required level. It's an endless toil for sure, and quite thankless too, but it is their toil for them to perform. No one can take this from them whether they wanted to or not. The loneliness is better for the anxieties it disproves. It is a settling, a limitation which discards so much to guarantee one all-important thing. And so they don't suffer from it, but instead enjoy it. As always, it is the rigorous work which defends against questioning. Really, Antarcticite is similar to Cinnabar, both living lonely lives away from the others, but to wildly different results. One is valued for their detriments because it's what others can't do, and the other isn't. Antarcticite is where Cinnabar would be the moment the toxins are shown to do something useful. And that lets us see that there's also a downfall of their comfort to be found here. The point of these slivers the gems hold is to prevent the eternal search, which in itself means a sort of stasis, a state where the same day over and over again is good. They don't want to be uncovering new things which lead them to change the way the world is seen, and so would any of them ever think to search for a new role for Cinnabar except Phos, who themselves is already searching? In the way Diamond only helps because of their own struggles, it's kind of the same for Phos. The outliers like Cinnabar will suffer more the more comfortable the rest are, as a cycle perpetuates itself. Comfort is inherently against change, so the more that are in comfort, the more the uncomfortable suffer. But back on track, Phos is awake all winter, butting in on Antarcticite's tasks, and comparing herself to someone who has no distraction from accomplishing their tasks, and that means the best possible person at them. Expressing a desire that they want to grow, Antarcticite does allow for them to tag along, and they begin to share some of the work. But as expected, it's even harder with Phos working in the worst conditions with no experience. They push to their limits to not even be able to compare, arms cracking and breaking with one swing when Antarcticite can do it all day. There is a gradual change coming. They're able to get down the technique and make improvements, which Antarcticite does recognize. But it's slow. They probably won't be of any use for many, many winters. And so they begin to doubt. After all, their form is still what's limiting them. Those stupid arms are weak material. They got the form down, but their body is holding it back. It's not like the new legs that gave such speed and showed literal fast possibilities. They aren't breaking. So, should they really come to terms with a flawed body? Maybe more of that change is needed. As they're on the ice floes, which Sensei describes as remnants of the old world which amplify doubts, this grows and grows. Phos starts to hear voices saying exactly this, that they should lose their arms and find new ones. It worked out last time, didn't it? They don't have time to be gradual. What if Cinnabar is taken before then? It will work out if they lose more of themselves. It'll actually be better because that's what happened before, isn't it? Doubt begins feeding doubt. And while they ultimately resist, it puts them in a weak spot where they still fall backwards and into the ice, and their arms are lost for good, it seems. This doubt is the natural progression of what they learned. Hundreds of years provided evidence that their form simply wasn't enough, even for someone else trusted to provide uses. No one expected anything of them, to the point where they were seen the same as slug. But in a few days, gaining new parts of their body made a difference. One which wasn't enough yet, as we saw, but only because their form was still limiting them, right? Phos's all-out is Antarcticite's child play. If they had better arms, these issues would have faded away. If their whole body had been replaced, it would be a different story. The change spurs on a desire for more change because potential was at least shown in a large step. It's almost addictive for its potential to shortcut. When Phos hits a wall from here on out, what's the solution? To wait hundreds of years again, or to replace what they hate? There will be less and less work on handling their structure, and more desire to simply replace it. One doesn't hold so close the self that they hate, even if they know that what might come could be more dangerous. And quite literally, this change comes to consume them. Without arms, a substitute has to be found, leading the pair to the beach where the gems are born. Material appears every now and then, but the chances of it actually holding life is rare, with most simply breaking on the surface lifeless. They can hope to find some of the same material as themselves, but it's not good odds. As such, they only find a heavy gold and platinum alloy, which doesn't seem like a good fit, but desperate times, and so they try anyway. And what happens stuns them. The malleable material begins to shift in shape around Phos, twisting into monstrous forms and stretching out into the world before encasing their body within itself. It is a literal consuming change which destroys the form that wants to find them, literally with their classification as a gem, and further it weighs them down to prevent them from doing anything at all, just as they were beginning to gain the needed skills to fight, and just as the Lunarians alive, leading Antarcticite to fight alone since they're too far from Sensei for help. It doesn't go well. Although they initially succeeded, they're weakened enough that a single secondary attack while they try to help Phos is enough to destroy them. If they hadn't lost their arms, Phos could have helped out here, even if it was just blocking that one arrow. That's all they needed to do. but the consuming change prevented it. Having to constantly relearn a new form depleted the experience they gained, which could have helped here. So they once again find that the alteration alone isn't enough. They do manage to force their new form to work for them in rage due to the mentor's death, an unheard of mass emerging from that cube to twist and contort itself perfectly to the battle, chasing down the Lunarians far and away and literally rising into the sky to save their friend, a heroic moment in the making, sure to inspire for generations. And then it fails. The sword floats back down to earth far short of its goal. Utilizing this form for the first time, they're not yet strong or knowledgeable enough to, first of all, be able to throw it that far, or second of all, to know that they could have kept reaching out and probably caught up, rather than ever throwing the sword and it landing short. It's not something to blame them with. No one would be ready to use their new form to that extent. But that's exactly the point. A form change alone won't fix the issues. One still has to learn how to use it. And before Phos could even master the previous change, this one steals it away. In order to move the massive weight of their new body, they no longer have the speed that the shell legs brought them. They're now not even just losing their original self, but even the already altered one they hadn't mastered. This shift doesn't add on to the last one to somehow solve the problem of value, because, well, that's not how it works. Something is given up and something else is gained, always. This means that for each new level of power they reach, some old ones have to cease to be. This is how change consumes, because it in itself is not an answer, but rather just the means to re-roll the dice. The results still need acceptance. And that's not all that will be lost. Phos has dove hard enough into this that it is no longer an option. Even their agate legs can't support the weight without help, so the alloy cracks their body with each movement, and then fills the cracks to support itself, weaving throughout the entire form. As they run for the first time, there are chips left behind, little memories literally left behind, and the cracks are filled in with this new substance, which is by definition not them. With new legs and new arms, can you even really define Phosphophyllite as Phosphophyllite any longer? These traits which brought about that name aren't even present in this person anymore. And further, their memories will slowly fade away with each chip lost. To get stronger like this demands a literal loss of who they were. And it can't stop. It's required to support them now as they are, an ever-creeping loss of self. The path is set, and now the only option is to see where it leads. And so, can this ever really make them happy? Because there is no complete form. Physically perfect doesn't exist. That's why they're able to find their slivers of value to begin with, because in these fringe cases, their downfalls become their saviors. If perfect existed, life would be pointless, and to achieve perfection would equate to death, since change would halt. So in chasing ever-strengthening physical growth, there is no end, no point where one is suddenly allowed to be happy, because existence itself demands subjectivity. There are more and different chances, but the physicality of change alone does not make or break. It is a new person looking at the goals of who they once were, but with different capabilities. Is just being able to fight going to bring satisfaction once one is able to, or will they simply move on to new desires with greater power? They are fundamentally different in makeup, so how could one be satisfied with what the other once desired? Change is taking a risk. It's hoping that a new person will find happiness in the decisions of someone they once were. And physicality isn't where it stops. The mentality surrounding it all, the duties and requirements of new forms, play an important role which complicates things further. Because with each new opportunity comes, of course, new hang-ups. This is actually clear from the very start in Bort. They're the most perfect of the gems, both hard and durable and able to best almost any foe. And every single one here looks up to them. And that is exactly the problem, because even as the most perfect, Bort isn't guaranteed any more joy or value exactly because of this. In exchange for it, they just have duties and responsibilities that no one else would even begin to comprehend. There are subtle details throughout the series showcasing this, like when Phos goes missing into the ocean and Bort is the only one searching the hardest to the point of being slung over Sensei's shoulder in exhaustion. They hate Phos deeply, yet they are the one to search the hardest. It's because they have to. As the strongest, it is their internal duty to live up to the chances they were given. There is no point where one doesn't come to terms with birthright. Even the advantages need understanding and action. And for Bort, that's placing all things above their own value. They have a deep connection with Diamond despite the harshness they show them. In fact, that's exactly why. They want them to do nothing to be safe. Bort would rather fight off every foe alone and risk themselves than risk losing the one they love the most. And in cold efficiency directed at making that possible, the efficiency needed of having to do so much all the time, they come across as harsh and pair up with the strongest even if they despise them to protect what they love. For each opportunity this power presents, there are endlessly more duties to maintain it. Because after all, if Bort simply lazed around, would their form really be of any value? It's only worthwhile because of the effort they put in. It has to meet expectations the same as anyone else. This is what Phos finds climbing the ladder, with their new form making them one of the strongest when winter ends and the gems all wake up again. They had a whole season alone to put effort behind their form and learn it, and it did lead to improvements very often recognized by the others. And in those efforts, they learned that there wasn't much joy in the life they'd always dreamed of. They do have something quite uniquely them, which should serve as that all-important sliver which allows satisfaction, and yet it doesn't. Because is it really theirs if they had to become someone new for it? How much was lost for this? How much was sacrificed? And what all must they now do in obligation to maintain it? At the end of the day, what they're doing, even if through their own form, becomes really just the work for the others as they all begin to ask for things done. And even if they don't, it is simply doing it for their sake to prevent more losses like Antarcticite, whose loss traumatizes Phos into giving constant and unyielding effort. They can't let that happen again, so they'll seek more and more growth, never finding comfort. All the deficits were merely replaced with duty, and it isn't much different from being used as bait to regain another. One interaction sums it up the best.
強くなって満足か。
いいことがない。
だろうな。
It was there from the start. Bort was always visible. But Phos didn't have the perspective to see what Bort actually was. Their old self simply couldn't understand, and their new self has changed too much to go back now that they do. Gaining this perspective requires destroying the old one. Change perpetuates itself once more. Forward is the only way, their form always replacing itself ever so slowly until eventually only a new one is left. And this is the issue at the heart of it all. Change is always directed by who we once were, but only attained by who we change into, a new self with its own distinctions and desires and capabilities. When a goal which requires a shifting of self is achieved, it is achieved as someone new who will see it in a different light. The reason almost all the gems take a path of coming to terms with their structure, even if it requires what could easily be called feeble logic, is because the alternative has no end. Change perpetuates change as a new self is dissatisfied with the end of an old one. Every form needs coming to terms with, whether one chooses it or not. Phos can't do this because they don't even have a form to call their own anymore. They have a nebulous mass, the embodiment of change as they shapeshift to fit each and every situation. There is no comfort in this, a space where the self has no form. And even if we don't consider the arms, they've simply become a copy of Antarcticite, taking on their style and personality after their death. So if they did come to terms with it, isn't that just accepting who someone else was? Their thoughts, their values, that which drove them forward to begin with, it's all been lost. This is seen best where they return to Cinnabar. After the winter, Phos is asked to wake up Cinnabar, and for a moment they can't recall who that is. And although they do manage to with some effort, when they go to speak with them, a very important detail is missed. What Phos remembers is trying to find a different job for Cinnabar, and so they arrive offering one which is a duty to help them discover the truth, a harsh task which anyone could seek, but which they all decided against because it is so awful. Cinnabar is angry with this, because Phos said they would find better work for them, something only they could do, not just new work. And they're shocked to hear this. With those lost memories, Phos couldn't remember exactly what their motivation even was to begin with, and further, as someone new living a life of obligation, they would never even consider the importance of enjoying the work, and so never even think to recall something like that from their past self. The very thing which was meant to ascribe them value, and which did for some time as they felt uniquely valued by Cinnabar's honesty, is lost in who they've become. The idea which allowed them to make use of their new legs to turn a negative into a positive and create genuine personal growth was lost in chasing the shortcut once more. This is the issue. With so much alteration, the baseline becomes hazy and unrecognizable. As you go higher and higher, you lose sight of the floor you started from. It's impossible to stay on the path one thought would lead to satisfaction, and they end up wandering in the dark just in a different direction, the same as before. Without acceptance, there is no comfort. But comfort essentially simulates death. Phos sums up their experience quite simply.
見極めようと近づくほどわからないことが増えていく。
New duties, fresh responsibilities, old memories lost, distinct selves gained. Each step only brings new uncertainty to refill the gaps in what was lost. And as we said, there is no going back. This change is forever working its way through their body, and the pieces of them which held their old self are seemingly lost forever. The only direction is forward, to either find a state one comes to terms with, or forever change, itself simply a distraction against eternity, to never find stability, to never be able to consider one's true place in the horror that entails. In a way, it's a rigorous work of its own. Because in the end, that might be what all things are. Distractions from what we know deep down. That there is only one true comfort in the world, one the gems can never meet. They're predisposed to seeking eternal purpose because there is no guarantee of final peace for them. Whatever one chooses, the distraction of purpose or the task of change, it's all defenses against the truth. What's left is nothing more than envy for those who don't or choose not to know.
根拠なく明るい予感に甘えられてたのが不思議で、あの頃の自分が。
This video was pretty like aggressively somber, so it felt like I needed to end it on something a little different than that, and plus ending it on a quote makes end screen stuff awkward. I could explain the whole thing. There's no reason to. You're seeing a final product, not the possibilities. I don't know why I'm launching into them. Um, but yeah, it took me a while to get to the Land of the Lustrous. Someone told me to watch it, like I swear, years ago in Discord. And I feel like I should say sorry to them for just getting around to it now, because it really was pretty fantastic and really not difficult to write on. It came pretty naturally. I think it made its points, or at least what I gathered as its points, very well. And I wish there was a season 2 for me to go to, because it would be really interesting to see how it wraps up. It's one of those ones that I'll probably read the manga for one day just to get the full picture of, because it really did feel like something pretty special and unique. Yeah, I mean, I'm always there for explorations of the self, obviously. From Lane to, geez, anything on the channel, basically, it's all kind of exploration of self in a way. But Lane feels like the one that kicked it off, really. It was the first, like, video really focused on it. But this is a good addition to that. Anyway, this is not what's needed to kill watch time at the end of videos. I tried to do like a short outro, like only 20 seconds of the end screen, but it felt so generically like YouTubery, like this was just a job, and I can't do that, so I stuck to this instead. But anyway, thanks to the patrons who are probably on screen right now, but to everyone, of course, for your time. It really does mean a lot, especially recently, as like I question ability and everything, but knowing there are people who are willing to like spend their time on me and things is fantastic and validating and everything. So thank you very much. And I hope I'll see you again soon.